5-Year Mission, the podcast, episode 54.
By now you figured out that this is the 5-Year Mission podcast.
To every story, there is a beginning. And for 5-Year Mission, the beginning was as inauspicious as can be imagined. It was never meant to be anything special. And yet, what was to follow took on a life of its own, quite by surprise. And here we are today. But none of it would have happened without that initial spark, that idea. Welcome to 5-Year Mission, the podcast, the only podcast hosted by a band called 5-Year Mission. I am your host, Chris Spurgeon. And even those words we say each episode, wouldn't exist without that first inclination to do something a little different. And speaking of something a little different, this episode, I'll be interviewing a very special guest. You know him, you love him, the founder of the band 5-Year Mission, my bandmates and friend, Mike Rittenhouse. Mike, welcome to the show.
Hey, glad to be here, man. I've been thinking about this all week. I could not wait until today for this interview. I am stoked. Let's do it.
I'm glad you're so excited. This is the first time our listeners have heard from you in this format, so it's exciting. It's a first time thing.
Sure. I'm not a huge fan of being the only one in the spotlight, so even though it's just the two of us, this is still a little awkward. And yet I'm standing literally in a spotlight.
Yes, Mike's Zoom window he looks like General Zod being sentenced in Superman. Or no, that wasn't General Zod. It was one of the jury members.
Jor-El.
Oh yeah, I guess it was Jor-El, wasn't it? Well, at any rate, Mike's in the spotlight, literally and figuratively tonight. This episode, I suppose. So let's just get down to it, shall we? So Mike's the founder. He's the one that started it. His idea is what spawned this whole thing. But let's go back. Let's go back to little Mike, when Mike was first conceived. I mean, not quite that far back, but what are your first memories of music? I mean, where did it all start?
My first memories of music, I have a lot of music memories from when I was a very small kid. My dad had a band, and they would practice at our house in our living room. And this was regularly, like weekly, maybe a couple times a week. So I grew up with, in like the band life kind of. So this is back in the late 70s, early 80s. And they were a country band. I mean, they played some oldies like rock music, stuff like that. But it was very much like a 70s country band. In fact, they even had a single. The band was called Jim Rittenhouse and the Hard Times Band. And my dad, of course, was the leader of the band. And they had a single called Hard Times that my dad wrote, which was actually played on the radio. And
cool.
They even once were scheduled to perform on Hee Haw. But
really?
Yeah.
See, I didn't know that. I knew that your dad was in a band when you were growing up, but I had no idea that it was that sort of thing, that they were actually kind of known a little bit.
Yeah, a little bit. Like, I wouldn't say it was like a national thing or anything, but they were definitely like locally known. They played a lot of the places around the area where we lived and the surrounding towns. They had a lot of this. I mean, I was very young. I was like 4, 5, 6, 7 years old.
Yeah,
so
right.
My memory could be very askew. But I recall them playing a lot. I think they had a regular gig at a place that they would play like weekly or maybe once a month or something. And of course they didn't like tour around, but they played a lot.
did you ever get in there and, hey, Dad, can I play the tambourine or something?
Well, I was always running through, causing a ruckus. I was very crazy. It's weird to imagine this because I know I'm so. You guys like to call me a gargoyle, but I'm so quiet and everything now. But when I was a kid, I was very unhinged.
I can't see that. I just imagine you as just, the kid sitting in the corner going, hey,
No,
just
I was
chilling in the corner.
I was the kid running through the house in my underwear and throwing toys and yelling, and I was nuts. I most certainly had ADHD. Of course,
in the 80s, that was called spaz.
Yes, I was a spaz for sure. So yeah, I grew up with a lot of music around me. Of course, I had two older sisters, and one of them was 10 years older than me. The other one was about 6 years older than me, and they listened to all kinds of music from the 70s and 80s, and so I heard a lot of music from them and a lot from my parents. My mom liked the oldies. My dad listened to country. So I was very exposed to a lot of different kinds of music. So it was very musical for me growing up as a kid. Yes.
With all this, the music influences that you had coming at you, did you gravitate towards, early on, what did you gravitate towards as far as music, genre, I guess?
The first music that I ever owned, like, I had like cassette tapes.
Mm-hmm.
They were all movie soundtracks.
Like, okay. Can you remember any of them?
Yeah. I had Ghostbusters. I had Back to the Future. I had Young Einstein.
Yeah.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Okay.
A lot of those soundtracks. And I didn't have a lot of actual like albums or anything like that until I was a little older. I was a bit of a late developer.
With music.
Yeah,
as far as
just in general.
Yeah. Okay.
The other kids were all getting into sports and girls and stuff, and I was still playing with my Ninja Turtles. So, I was a little behind everyone.
So when did you first start thinking, hey, I kind of like music. What, maybe I should pick up an instrument and try this out?
Well, with my dad being the musician he was, of course, he tried to introduce it to me. I think I was 12 when he gave me my first guitar, which was a harmony, like the harmony, like a Sunbursts harmony guitar had the little plastic toggles, and it sounded terrible and didn't stay in tune. And but that was my first guitar, and I didn't really learn anything on that guitar. I had it probably 6 months to a year. And I had like a little amplifier, so I would plug it into the amplifier and just make noise. My dad tried to show me chords, but it didn't take. Like, I was not interested in learning the old fogey country chords that he was trying to show me. Like A and G.
So just like smack on the guitar and sing Ghostbusters?
No, by this point I was interested in rock music.
Okay.
So yeah, I was probably about 12 or 13. I was starting to get into stuff like glam rock and metal and stuff like that. A lot of it was my neighbor was also into music and guitars, and we kind of gravitated towards each other. He was a year younger than me, but we kind of hung out and did a lot of stuff, and every other week we started a new band. There was just the two of us.
So at this point, was this still with your harmony guitar, or did you have something new?
Yeah, I had that for, like I said, for about a year, and I learned So I learned how to play power chords.
Okay.
My dad showed me that, and that did take. So I learned how to play stuff like Iron Man, Smoke on the Water, all the
Yeah.
ones you always hear everyone playing at the music stores. So I learned those, and once I actually was truly interested in playing and learning, I really got in. Of course, as you and everybody probably knows, I really got into Motley Crue.
Yeah.
So this is around 1989. So I was
Okay.
13. So and Dr. Feelgood came out, and the song "Kickstart My Heart," and they open the song with he plays the guitar strings and uses a whammy bar, and it sounds like a motorcycle. And my dad heard me playing it all the time. Like I was always in my room listening to it. So he was like, "You know how to do that, right? With a whammy bar." And I was like, no. And then of course we didn't have a whammy bar. So he could tell that I really wanted to learn how to do that. So
You don't have a lot of whammy bars in country music.
no. So I got my first, what I'll say, real guitar, which was a Westone guitar.
Okay.
That guitar, it was cherry red, and it had like several pickups and real toggle switches, and of course it had a whammy bar.
Whammy bar, right? The ever essential whammy bar.
Yeah. So I got that guitar. I learned how to play the thing from Kickstart My Heart, which I played all day long. I'm sure I think my dad probably regretted getting me that. And so I had that guitar for about 1 or 2 years, and I learned a lot of stuff on that guitar. I learned actual chords. The first chord I ever learned was G. I remember that. Like, this is the first one.
Good chord.
It's the first one that stuck.
Yeah.
I had a chord chart.
Not as easy as E, but
yeah,
it's a good chord.
Well, I was playing around with the chords, and I would like put my fingers on there and try and play a chord. And when I did the G, I noticed it sounded exactly like "Shelter Me" from Cinderella.
Okay.
That song opens up with the G chord, and they're just playing it, and I played that G chord. I'm like, oh my god, that's that chord. And so like I just played that chord all day long. I'm like, yeah, I sound just like Cinderella. And so then I started learning more chords after that. Within the next few months or that next year, I pretty much learned like all the regular chords. So yeah, my dad got me my first acoustic guitar, which was an Alvarez. I was probably 13 or 14, and then I started learning a bunch of stuff on that. Started playing around with. I really got into Randy Rhoads, the guitarist from Ozzy Osbourne's first 2 albums, and he used to be in Quiet Riot before that. And on Ozzy's first album, there's a classical piece that he wrote called D. It's really pretty. It's a really prettiest thing. It makes no sense, and it's completely out of place on an Ozzy Osbourne album, but it's very beautiful. And so I learned how to play that, which I can still play to this day.
Now, were these songs that you were learning, this is all self-taught, right?
Yes.
You're just playing by ear?
Yeah, so I should go back. No, not technically by ear on some of them. A lot of them I would get guitar magazines and learn the tab.
Okay.
But I should step back for a second.
Yeah, this was before easy access to guitar tabs on the internet, kids.
Yes.
This was back when you had to go to the store and get guitar magazines.
Once a month, Guitar World would come out.
Yeah, right.
And there would be like 2 or 3 songs transcribed in it. And if you're lucky, they were songs that you wanted to learn. Well,
and they were usually songs of, popular songs at the time. You'd have like a couple popular ones and then a B-side. And you could go out and get a Guitar World magazine. And there were a couple other guitar magazines, but as I recall, Guitar World was usually had the best stuff in it.
Yeah, Guitar World was usually the best.
Yeah.
So let's go back just a little bit. Before I learned chords, my dad took me to a music teacher, a guitar teacher, who tried to teach me how to play, and I was not interested. And he was trying to show me chords, and I just couldn't do it. And I think I learned like 2 or 3 chords and played them with him. But all those sessions ended up being was me like going back and forth between like C and F, and him playing these cheesy leads over it. and after like a month or two of that, he told me he was like, look, you're not really learning anything, and I feel like you're wasting your time and your money. And then he told me to try to go learn stuff on my own, and then if I got to a point where I wanted to truly learn, I could come back or whatever. Which that never happened. So that he was like this old guy who my dad knew that worked at like a music store. My dad was friends with the guy who owned it. So then there was this guy who was friends with my sister, who he was like a guitar virtuoso, at least as far as our small town was concerned. Like he could play like the Van Halen stuff, like he was pretty good. Right. And he had like long hair. He was my sister's age. Like, so then my parents, they took me to some lessons with him, and like the same thing happened. Like I was more interested in decorating my guitar, putting stickers on it and stuff than actually learning anything. And he got frustrated with me also. He was like, look, man, you're just not going to learn this stuff. So, we should just stop doing this. So,
man, 2 teachers down.
I know.
You're a hard student.
So it ended up being me teaching myself.
Okay.
So pretty much everything I know today, with the exception of a few little things, I learned myself. I just taught myself by listening and playing and looking at guitar magazines.
So, I mean, it sounds like the metal and that sort of thing were your first real musical influences, the ones that you were first passionate about.
Yeah, I really got into, like I said, Motley Crue. Later, I got into Guns N' Roses, and a lot of bands in those, like in that genre, like like those kinds of bands. But I liked other music too. And my mom got me into the Beatles.
Okay.
And so when I was about 15, I just deep dove into the Beatles. Like
that's a deep dive.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of area to cover there.
My mom got me for Christmas, I got their entire catalog on cassette.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a lot of cassettes.
It is. It was like it was like 13 cassettes or something. It's like every album. And I tore into that, and I listened to every single one of them, like beginning to end, over and over. And I was pretty obsessed with Beatles for like the next 10 years. Yeah. Of course, even to today, I still love the Beatles. But at that time, I got huge into it. So that also helped a lot with me learning songs, because their songs were not quite as hard to learn as, say, like Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
So their songs, it was a lot of like just chords and stuff. So I could actually play them. And then I would learn how to play the chords, and then I would learn how to play like the little guitar licks that like George Harrison was doing. And that started teaching me how to do more with my guitar than just play along. I started learning like harmony parts and leads and just different ways to approach it. And with the Beatles, I mean, as you know, they went at it from all different angles. So I was learning all different styles and ways of playing and doing music.
When you were learning all this stuff, did you have anybody, did you have a Paul to your John, when you were learning how to play through the Beatles?
Actually, that's a very good question. So the neighbor that I mentioned earlier, his dad just bought him like all kinds of stuff, right? So I remember my dad got me like that Westone, and then so like not long after that, suddenly his dad got him like the studio Les Paul with the Marshall full
Oh,
stack, and like he
yeah.
had like everything, like 50 pedals. So
Yeah, he was the kid with the Millennium Falcon and the AT-AT
yep,
and the Ewok Village.
yep, and the Death Star and the
Yeah,
GI Joe aircraft carrier. Yeah,
yeah.
he was that kid for sure.
Okay, okay.
And so his dad got him all that stuff, and then he learned he learned a few songs, but he like I was learning all these Beatles songs and how to play like all this different stuff, and he was still playing like the Iron Man and Smoke on the Water stuff. Like
Yeah,
now I'm pretty sure later, to give him credit, later on, like a couple years later, he actually learned and got fairly good at playing guitar. But at that time, I was far ahead of him.
yeah.
So he was not my George or my Paul.
Kid.
So to answer the other question though, I did have a Paul to my John, which
Okay.
his name was Tony Lucas, and he was a grade ahead of me in school. And there was another kid at school named TJ Collins. We were all guitar players, and TJ was probably the best one, a guitar player out of us.
Okay.
And we all started playing together and like forming our own bands and stuff. And I learned a lot from those guys, but eventually TJ kind of went off and did his own thing. And Tony and I stuck together and kind of became like a John and Paul. Like we were writing songs, and we were both like writing and singing our own songs, and we would like play off of each other and like learn harmonies.
Mhm.
And like he would play lead on my songs, I would play lead on his songs. So it was definitely like a partnership. And actually I ended up playing in bands with him for about 10 years.
So at what point did you move from just a couple guys playing guitar to getting into a full band?
I was about 15, and there were several kids at the school that were into music, and so it wasn't that hard to find three guys who all like wanted to play instruments and form a band. And there were a few, I'm gonna say, decent drummers for high school.
Yeah, yeah.
They weren't virtuosos by any means, but they could play a beat. So we ran through several different people who would just like come over and jam, and a few would stick for a while. But that was definitely where I learned how to just like jam with other guys and not just along with a song on the radio.
Do you remember what your first band name was?
Oh man.
Or maybe it'll be easier to, what's the first band name that you remember?
So the first band name that I remember that was an actual band that consisted of more than just a couple of guitar players.
Yeah.
We had a drummer, so I would call it a real band. We called it Mr. Yuck.
Oh, you know what? I remember you talking about Mr. Yuck.
I may have mentioned that. And then that didn't last long, of course. I mean, we played a bunch of cover songs.
It's a great name, though. I mean, for anybody who doesn't know, when Mike and I were growing up, Mr. Yuck was basically, you'd stick these stickers on
chemical bottles,
hazardous items.
Yeah,
that you didn't want, that the kids weren't supposed to drink the bleach or something, and you would slap a Mr. Yuck sticker on there. And there was like a emergency phone number on there too, right?
Yeah, it had
and they were green.
Yep.
And it just had like a face with a tongue sticking out,
with like a frown and a tongue sticking out. And we took the frown and turned it upside down so that it was like a smile with the tongue sticking out, but it was the exact same thing.
Perfect.
So I don't know. I remember how long that band lasted. All of these bands were like different versions of the same group of people with like one different guy. So the first band I remember having which ended up being like what I would call, I would consider it my first true real band. You know, we
Okay.
actually played a couple parties. We had our own original songs. We played a lot of cover songs. That band was called River of Pain.
Ooh.
We called it that after. I know.
Yes, that deserves a good hearty chuckle.
We called it that after a song that Tony wrote called River of Pain.
Okay, and this is the same Tony as in Tony and TJ, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
The Paul to my John.
Yeah, right.
So that was the first band where I actually sang a song in front of an audience, and like a song that I wrote.
Yeah. How'd it go?
The song?
Yeah.
Like what you asked me what the words were?
No. What was when you played it for the first time? What was the reception? Did people dig it, or was it like, like some of the shows we play where you play and you get done and you hear like one guy in the back
it's
kind of
funny.
clapping?
I have to be honest, I don't remember.
Yeah,
I was so terrified and had so much stage fright that I don't remember anything beyond that microphone.
That's fair.
Who knows? I don't know. I don't know how people took it.
Okay. So now you're kind of playing out and seeing what it's like. Did you ever, when you were younger, did you ever have aspirations that extended beyond just playing house parties, where you thought, you know what, I could do this. This is what I want to do. Like, I want to be a musician.
Absolutely. I mean, from the point of being like 13 and watching music videos and watching MTV with the neighbor kid, and listening to the Motley Crue albums, and back then bands would put out like home videos of them just like hanging out. and we watched all of them. We watched like the Motley Crue one, the Skid Row one, there's like a Poison one, and we would just like watch those and just daydream about being on the road on tour and playing stadiums and fans and so yeah, absolutely. I didn't want to just play in a garage or like the school talent show. My ultimate dream and ambition was to have like, a number one song on the radio or whatever,
Now, prior to 5 Year Mission, would you say that Little Voice was probably the most successful active band you were in, or were there any others?
Yes. So after River of Pain, we finally broke up. We played together for like 2 years. Tony and I stuck together and kept writing songs, and then we formed another band with some guys from Lafayette called My Insanity.
Okay.
And of course, River of Pain, we actually recorded like like songs and like made our own little cassette tape, like recording them.
Yeah.
But
the demo tapes.
Yeah.
I didn't. I should probably go back. River of Pain and then My Insanity, were these metal bands?
Kind of
hard rock.
I was starting to lean away from the metal. Tony was very metal. A lot of his stuff was metal.
The band names are kind of metal.
Yes, I know. But I was, because of the Beatles and because I listened to a lot of punk music, my music was starting to lean more towards that kind of writing style.
Okay.
Which is kind of my style still today, honestly.
Yeah.
Like a lot of it falls into those categories. So My Insanity, we actually went into a studio and recorded an album.
Okay.
Which was never mixed, so I have like the rough mix off the board. And many times over the years I've tried to contact the guy to see if he has the tape still, but
right.
After 30 years, there's no chance. but that band, we were together for a couple of years, and I really learned a lot of. I mean, I really honed my guitar skills in that band.
Okay.
That was a band that we would hang out at the drummer's house in Lafayette, and we literally got together and practiced every day. Because all of us, we were, I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
And Tony was 21. The drummer was 22. We had a bass player that was like 25, and the drummer and bass player both lived at the house. And Tony and I would go there every day, and we would play like 30 songs that we worked on all the time, like every night. So we were tight. I mean, that band was solid, like as far as, knowing what we were doing.
I remember those days, early 20s, not really a whole lot of responsibilities, going and, hitting the studio in the evening and just playing as long as you could every night.
There was some drama between the bass player and the drummer, and the drummer was kind of on and off some drugs and everything. So that band kind of fell apart eventually. And a little bit, like 6 months or a year went by. And then Tony and I got back together, and then we ran into the drummer, and he was clean. So we got back together with him. And then a buddy of mine that I was working with, his name was Alan. Yeah. And he's still a friend of mine. He lives in Lafayette. And the next band we started was called Broken Up. It was
I've heard you talk about that one.
Yep. It was the same band as My Insanity with a different bass player and a different name. Okay. And we played a lot of the same songs, but now we called ourselves Broken Up, and it was kind of a joke on the fact that we had broke up already.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that band, we actually went into the studio and recorded again, and a much better version of a lot of the stuff that we had already recorded.
Okay.
Then that band was together for 2 or 3 years, and that's when I met Little Voice. Okay. And we were playing shows with them. We played.
So Little Voice was a band before you were in it?
Yes. So for anyone listening who doesn't know, I used to be in a band called Little Voice with my ex-wife, Erica. And the drummer in the band's name was Lori. And when I met them, it was just Erica and Lori. They actually had a guitar player, but he was kind of in and out of the band. And I saw an opportunity. I was like, because I liked the music that they were playing a lot. On some levels, I liked it a lot better than what I was doing with my own band.
Yeah, it was definitely a unique sound. What the sound that Little Voice had before you were in it, did it change at all when you were in it?
It did. I added a bit more of a rock element to the band.
Okay.
It was very acousticy, like Lisa Loeb kind of stuff. Okay. Before I joined. Okay. I mean, Erica was very into like classic rock and stuff like that, but the stuff she was writing and the way she was playing was very like folky.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, they had a couple different guitarists that were kind of in and out of their band, and I was around all the time because Erica and I were starting to see each other and hang out, and our bands played together a lot. So I actually learned several of their songs just by watching them play.
Okay.
And so one day they needed a guitar player for a show, and I said, "Hey, I'll do it." And I joined them on stage and played like half of the set with them, and then after that, I was just in the band. And so we were in that band for about 6 years, I think.
And that band didn't have a bass player.
No, it was just Lori, Erica, and myself.
Except for me.
Yeah.
Except for me at one show.
It was just the three of us, and sometimes Erica or I would play bass, depending on what the song was. And sometimes we just didn't have bass. It was just two guitars. We definitely that was the first band where I was like swapping instruments around. Yeah. Because I guess I skipped over a little bit earlier. I don't just play guitar. I mean, I also play bass, which is kind of I mean, that's not really a big stretch for
Yeah.
someone playing guitar. But I also play some piano, keyboard, which I learned a lot of that kind of stuff in high school. I'd go in the choir room and goof around on the piano in there, and the teacher would always pop his head out and be like, "Mike." When I would start playing something too much and it would start annoying him. I also play drums. I mean, I can keep a beat and I can put in some fills. I'm not a super fantastic drummer, but enough that I could jam with a band.
Yeah.
So yeah, by the time we get to Little Voice, we had other instruments on stage, and we would kind of swap around on different ones depending on what song it was. Which, of course, anyone who's seen 5 Year Mission,
that's kind of what we do.
Yeah, we're always trading around.
Yeah, and Little Voice was the precursor to 5 Year Mission.
Yeah,
right. That was the last step before.
Yep.
Before we became what we are.
Yeah. So yeah, you met me when I was in Little Voice, and
yeah, let's talk about that. Well, talk about how we met.
Well, I know we've told the story a few times, but
we met. Yeah,
I'm sure
the abbreviated version.
We can do it abbreviated. We were playing a 4th of July show at, what was the name of that place? It had monkey in the title or something, right?
The Ugly Monkey.
Was it the Ugly Monkey?
Yeah, downtown Indianapolis.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we were playing the Ugly Monkey. It was like an all day, like 4th of July music.
Yeah, it started
festival
at noon
or something.
And went till
started at noon, went to like 3 a.m. or something, and there were like 30 bands or.
There was a lot of bands, and there were 2 stages. There was an outside stage and an inside stage.
Yep. Little Voice was the first band at noon, outside, and
in July,
in July on July 4th. So we showed up, we played, we played our hearts out for the sound guy. And I think
there were some people there,
and I think James Young was there, right?
Yeah, he was, and there wasn't a huge crowd, but it was. I mean, there were people there to hear you. I think it was, the lunch crowd was there.
When we first started playing, it was literally just the sound guy and us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, a few people showed up as we were playing. And
I wandered out there about mid-set, I think.
Yeah. Then you showed up, and you and I had spoken a few times on IMN.
Yeah.
And
indiemusic.net.
Yeah.
Which was for all the kids out there, that was a message board. Yeah. Which was kind of the precursor to social media.
Yeah. Yeah, you and I kind of had talked a couple times on there. You donated to help me fix my broken window.
Yeah, somebody busted your van window in.
Yep.
I think I threw you like $5 or something.
Yep. you showed up, and I have no idea what songs we played or whatever. I'm sure that
I remember was the one.
Yep.
You played Xanadu.
Yep.
And little did you know that I was a longtime Xanadu fan of the movie and the music, and you started playing that, and I was like, "Oh my God,
I know,
you got to be kidding me!"
Well, we started playing the song, and she sang the first line, and I hear from across the room or whatever, I hear Xanadu.
That was me.
Yep. And then you came up and talked to us afterwards because
I did.
Because you liked us doing Xanadu so much, and you and I started talking about it, and we're still talking today, about almost 20 years later. Yeah,
that's right. And I think did you already knew Patrick, didn't you? Or did you?
Around that time we met a lot of bands and played. We were kind of starting to play around town. We played the Melody, and we played Radio and a few other places. And one of those shows we played with the Shake-Ups, which, as everyone knows, is Patrick's other band that he plays with all the time. One of his other bands. Right. And the Shake-Ups today is not the same Shake-Ups that I'm talking about.
No.
It was a completely different band. The only person who's the same as Patrick. They don't even play the music that they used to play back then. Well, actually, Ed is in the Shakeups now again, and Ed was in the band at the time. So Patrick and Ed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we played with the Shakeups, and of course they were like, "You guys are great, we love it, awesome," and of course we liked their music, and we started talking to them, and that was at the time that Patrick had Bubba's Bowling.
Yeah, right.
And he invited us to play a show there, so we went and played with the Shakeups at Bubba's Bowling, and then we just kind of started hanging out on and off with him and his wife at the time, Kathy, and we just kind of got to know them and the Shakeups.
Yeah.
So we played a lot of shows with them, and we have a lot of Patrick and I have a lot of memories from that time. Like it was kind of cool, fun, just being friends in rival bands.
I actually knew Patrick as well because I ran an open mic night at a bar called P.S. O'Rourke's. The bar's still there, but it's called something different. I don't know what it is anymore.
I remember that title or that.
Yeah. Name. And that's where I met the guys in Rebuilt, which was the band that I was playing in. But I ran an open mic night there, and Patrick and Kathy would come in and play every once in a while. So I had met Patrick before, and you had met Patrick prior to us meeting each other. So we had 3/5 of 5-year mission kind of sneakily meeting each other before it was even close to being formed.
Yep.
So let's talk about that. You and I and a guy named Rob had gotten together and created this idea.
And if anybody wants to hear more, like a detailed story about this, we did an entire podcast about it, about the band collective.
Yeah, Indie Band Collective. I mean, long story short, we were creating shows where bands that just needed exposure and later on artists as well. And we just have shows and we kind of facilitated those things. But that's where we met Noah.
Yep.
And so Noah and Mike and I were all in this band collective. And Noah, of course, was playing in Eisenhower Field Day at the time. But at some point...
And you were in Rebuilt.
And I was in Rebuilt. And at some point, and a little bit later, I was playing in Dorsey as well.
Right.
But at some point, Mike and Noah started hanging out a little bit more. And well, why don't you? You don't have to tell the weird story.
Yeah, we've told it plenty of times.
We've done that before. But let's just
the band collective. We would have meetings, and various people would show up from all different bands. Sometimes some wouldn't be there. Sometimes a lot would be there. One night, it ended up just Noah and I were the only two people who showed up, and we just sat there and talked about nerdy stuff all night. He told me about his action figure collection. I told him about all the nerdy stuff I love and my obsession with sci-fi and Star Trek. And then I told him about the idea that I had for 5-year mission, and he thought it was an awesome idea and asked if we could do it together, or maybe I asked him. I can't really remember. And
I always tell the story about when I became part of this, but let's hear it from your perspective, because I think I always tell it, but you don't, and I'm interested to hear what you had to say about this.
So Noah was like, yeah, I want to do this, and so the original idea was that we were just going to write and record songs about episodes. It was just going to be a recording project. I was thinking it would be something like Ween.
Okay.
Where the songs, it didn't matter what genre or style or whatever, it was just like whatever we felt like writing for an episode, we would write it, and it would just be like the two of us. Because my friend Alan that I mentioned earlier, the bass player from Lafayette, he and I really connected, and after Broken Up had ended and it was just, and I was in Little Voice, he and I continued to hang out on a daily basis, and we would stay up late at night and like write songs and record. And it was just like the two of us, and I would usually play the drums, and then we would record various guitar and bass parts together. And we just wrote these songs, and we had this whole like album or two's worth of songs that we had done, and I had so much fun doing that. And I really liked Noah, and I liked his style, and he reminded me a lot of Alan with just how he acts and his humor. So we really connected, Noah and I. And so I thought, hey, this is a guy that would be perfect for doing this duo. He loves, sci-fi, and he likes Star Trek, and he's a good songwriter. And so in my mind, it was just going to be the two of us, and that would be it. And we would, I would record drums, or we use the drum machine or whatever, and we just like make a bunch of ridiculous songs up. So
and then I came along and ruined it.
we were talking about it at one of the collective meetings.
Yeah.
And you overheard it, and you're like, I want to do that.
Pretty much. As I recall, I said, hey, can I just write a couple and just send them to you and see what you think? And you're like, sure. Why not?
I think for a very brief time, like maybe a day or a week or something there, in the back of my mind, at least, I was like, damn it. Because I imagine me writing every one of these songs, and then I like opened it up to, well, Noah can write songs with me, and now it's three of us writing songs. Like my contribution was shrinking more and more with like each band member.
Well, and then Patrick was in California, and he moved back into town, and so we said, hey, I think you just asked him, didn't you?
Well, he and I originally had talked about doing something together before he moved, and then he moved back, and I think it was around the same time that you were interested, and I think I had already maybe mentioned it to him as well, and so then it was just the four of us, like suddenly we were all four doing it.
Right. And then we played around in like your living room for a while. And I distinctly remember being in your living room on your couch and having all these like papers spread out around me with lyrics and stuff, and us, just kind of banging around. And we had moved into Noah's house, and we had everything set up there. Mm-hmm. And that's when we were like,
Noah had his whole like living room area set up for Eisenhower Field Day.
Right. That's right. So we just figured, let's just get a drummer in here, and maybe we can, do some full band stuff. And we auditioned a couple, and we found Andy, and that was it. And
it's funny, it turned out that Andy had been on IMN.
Yeah, like we knew who he was.
Like conversing with us on occasion, and he had played in bands who share the stage with like the Shake-Ups and Rebuild. So like I think I was the only one who really hadn't crossed paths with him.
There weren't many degrees of separation between us before we all got together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know that before the Star Trek band, you had thought about doing like Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Right.
If you hadn't, what made you choose Star Trek over that or anything else?
So when I was thinking of doing the Buffy band, this was the very early 2000s, probably. Yeah. I mean, Buffy probably had just ended, like it's probably 2004, 2005.
Okay.
And Patrick was still in town before he moved to California. And he loved Buffy, and we talked about it all the time. And I was like, hey, it'd be cool to just like write songs about episodes of Buffy. And supposedly he wrote like one or two songs that he still has like in his repertoire.
Well, he had that Joss Whedon Is Your Master ukulele song too.
He moved to California. Erica and I had Ruby. And I opened up Hero House, so a lot of things distracted from doing that project. Yeah. But as far as the change in theme, all right, so let's jump back in time again. So when I was a teenager, one of my friends that I went to high school with, his name was Randy Stahl, and his dad was like a hippie who or he was like a hippie in the 60s and 70s, and he was really cool. But he had the entire original series on VHS.
Okay.
And
another large collection, much like the tapes of the Beatles.
Yes, a larger collection physically.
Yeah,
for sure.
You can only fit so many episodes on one of those VHS tapes.
Well, these were the actual like official ones, the ones that had like 2 episodes per tape.
Yeah.
And so
they had those on beta as well.
So we started watching them as a joke. We were like, "Oh my god, look, it's that cheesy show. Let's watch it." And we put it in, and the first one was the Corbomite maneuver. And,
okay, that's an interesting one to start with.
Yeah, well, the tapes were the episode order on the tapes was production order.
Yeah, okay,
so
that makes sense.
Corbomite maneuver was the first one, and we were making fun of it. It was ridiculous, but there's also something very entertaining and campy about it. So we watched that, then we watched another one, and then we watched another one, and then it turned into this thing where once or twice a week we'd all go hang out at Randy's house and we'd watch like an episode or 2 of Star Trek, just like for fun. Like we weren't like getting super into it. Also around that same time, actually this would have been like a couple years before that. I was still pretty young at this point, like 11 or 12. I remember sneaking downstairs one night and my sister was watching something on TV, and I was on the steps, like just watching it from behind. No one knew that I was there watching it. And she was watching it. It had these 2 identical androids. And it was just this weird thing. And I was just mesmerized. It was the episode Brothers from TNG.
Okay.
With Data and Lore. Yeah. And I remember that. I think that was probably the first Star Trek I ever watched, ever. I had no idea what it was or what was going on. Yeah. But anyway, so for the next few years, I appreciated Star Trek, and my friends and I joked around and made fun of it. But I didn't get super into it. I did kind of start getting into TNG in the later years and watched a lot of the episodes from the last few seasons. I watched a lot of Voyager when it was on, but I didn't watch everything. I never watched any Deep Space Nine. That show was trash. Why are they on a space station? They're supposed to be exploring space. I don't want to watch the mall in space. And it's all soap opera drama. I need action. I need adventure. So anyway,
just gotta wait till those final seasons, Mike. Just get to season 4, then it gets really good.
Sure. So I didn't watch any Deep Space Nine, and then Enterprise when it started. I watched the first like 5 episodes or so, but I bailed because I just wasn't into it.
Yeah,
and that was it. Like that's my whole like experience with Star Trek up to that point was it's this cheesy sci-fi show that has a few different ones that they're kind of silly. TNG's okay. So and I went to the theater and saw the TNG movies.
Suffice it to say, your love for Star Trek was a slow burn.
Yes, this is up to the beginning of 2000s. Enterprise started in 2001, so that's where we're at in my timeline.
Your timeline.
And like I said, after that, around 2003, 2004 is when Patrick and I were talking about doing Buffy.
Okay.
I was working at FedEx office. This is when we had. This was right around the time right before the band Collective started. I just call it FedEx office because that's what it is now, and that's what people know. It is now,
yeah.
But Kinko's, right. I worked at Kinko's, which is a much cooler name.
Yeah, and Mike's Kinko's was where all his band friends went to get flyers.
Yep.
Like, hey Mike, can you print me off like 50 flyers? Yeah, sure.
Sure. Here's 200. That'll be $1.
Yeah, no problem.
So it was right around this time that that Star Trek was being shown on. There was a cable channel. I think it was called G4.
Yeah, G4.
And they would show the original series.
And they had in like a little box.
Yeah,
and they had like
and they
information
had
about it.
Yeah, the little. Actually, Michael Okuda is the one who wrote all those little.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Yeah, there are all these like little facts and things.
It was cool.
Yeah, and but it also had a little chat room on the side of the screen where people would chat about whatever. Like, and I was just like,
it was a neat idea.
Yeah, and so I started just watching that just for fun, and I started like learning all of these inside details and whatever about the characters in the show and stuff.
That's where G4 was like a gamer channel network. That was Olivia Munn rose to fame on G4, as I recall.
So I started really enjoying it, but sometimes it would be on while I was at work. And so I started to DVR the episodes that I was missing because I was enjoying watching it so much.
Yeah.
And then I found also at that exact same time, I think it was on Spike TV, they were showing The Next Generation. And they would show, it was like 2 or 4 episodes a day. And so I started to watch that because I'm like, oh, I'm enjoying this Star Trek. And I remember watching Next Gen. I'll watch that too. And I started watching it and I just catch whatever episodes were on that day. And then I started like, you know, I had to go to work and I'm like, I want to see the rest of this episode. So I would like DVR the rest of it. And then I would like see what episode was on next while I was at work. And I'm like, well, I want to see that too. So I DVR that one. So I set my DVR to record all the Star Trek Next Gens and all the Star Trek TOS on the 2 different channels. And then and it got to the point where I had like 30 episodes of Star Trek on my DVR they had to catch up on. So I was like kind of burned through those, and I was really enjoying it, even more than I did back when it was first on or whatever.
Yeah,
something about it was clicking with me. And I remember the episode. I got to the episode where Geordi LaForge the episode starts with him in a shuttlecraft, and he's on his way to some kind of conference, and a Romulan warbird shows up and they kidnap him. And I remember seeing the beginning of that episode, and I had to leave for work, and I'm like, man, this is so good. Like I love this show. and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to watch every episode of Next Generation. Like that was the day I was like, I'm going to watch all of them. And so then like I printed out at work, I printed out a list of all the episodes of Next Gen in the broadcast order, and to make sure that I don't miss any.
Yeah.
And then I started watching them, and like they would show so many of them that they kept just like, when they got to the end, they would just start it over. So, it wasn't hard for me to like just jump in and then see the whole thing.
I remember a time when syndicated Star Trek was everywhere. It was like marathoned on every other channel.
Yeah.
And there was always Star Trek to watch, especially later at night.
So then on Spike TV, they'd show like 2 episodes of Next Gen, but then they'd also show 2 episodes of Deep Space Nine.
Okay.
And I had made my way through Next Gen, and I was like, man, I'd been watching the TOS episodes on G4, and I'm like, man, I love Star Trek. and I was like, do I really want to watch Deep Space Nine though? Fine, I'll give it a try. And so I started with I caught it right when it first episode, so I started watching it, and it wasn't long before it really grew on me, and I'm like, Deep Space Nine is pretty cool, and so I'm like, and I watched probably 1 or 2 seasons of that, And then that was when I declared, I'm like, I am going to watch every episode of Star Trek.
Oh boy.
And of course, all my free time, I'm sitting at home watching Star Trek, instead of like actually living.
We've
my
all
life.
been there.
Yeah.
Well, except for Noah.
Except for Noah. So I burned through all the D Space Nines, and I print out little lists, little sheets that listed every episode of each series, and I just made sure like I was watching everything. I watched all the D Space Nines, and then Voyager wasn't airing on anything, so I was like, "What am I gonna do?" And I'm like, "You know what? I love Star Trek. I'm gonna order the DVDs." So the first series I actually ordered the DVDs was Voyager because I couldn't watch it anywhere.
Because you hadn't seen it. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I'd seen episodes back in the day.
Yeah.
But I would say I probably watched about half of the episodes of Voyager when they aired. So I got the DVDs of Voyager and I watched all of Voyager. And the only thing I had left was Enterprise. And I was like, man, Enterprise, I remember watching some of that. It was real bad. I don't want to watch it. But I'm like, you know what? I'm going to watch all of Star Trek. It's my duty. It's my mission. So,
you had faith in the heart.
Yeah.
You had faith in the heart. Yeah.
Well, not yet. I didn't have faith in the heart yet. Luckily,
you just didn't know it. You did. You just didn't know it yet.
At this point, they started showing the reruns of Enterprise on Sci-Fi. And so I was able to watch that entire series on Sci-Fi. By DVRing it. So I watched that whole series. And by the end of that series, I most certainly had faith of the heart. and
it's amazing how that song grows on you.
It really does.
Because when I first heard it, I was like, "Oh my god!" Why?
It's the worst. But I cannot.
And then by several episodes in, you're like, "Oh yeah, I got to watch the intro."
The visual with the song and the lyrics really works.
Yeah, it does.
And I understand people don't like the song or whatever, but like, how can that not grab you? Like it's so good. I do remember it was around when I was watching the 6th season, I think, of Deep Space Nine, when it is like in the heart of the Dominion War. And episodes are all starting to bleed into each other, and everything is just really, really good. And I remember thinking, I should write songs about this.
Oh.
And I was like, maybe I should take that Buffy idea and apply it to Star Trek. I mean, Buffy only has 7 seasons. Star Trek has like 17 or whatever.
Yeah, right.
At that point, they had about 30 seasons.
That's a lot. You had the idea, you got all of us into it, but your original idea was just you and Noah, or just you and one other person. You mentioned that when I first started insinuating myself into the whole project, for a couple of days, you're just like, oh man, I just wanted this to be. Did you ever, aside from that initial part, the initial time period where you were unsure of what was happening, do you ever regret the direction that it took and wonder what would have happened if it would have just been this little project where it was you and Noah focusing purely on the music and just kind of doing that project?
My life would be very different right now.
That's true.
If we had just stayed the two of us and focused on that little project.
Yeah.
I certainly don't have any regrets. And the period where I was unsure was very short and very mild. Like, I think it's just you get an idea of what something's going to be, and then it starts going a different way, and you have to reassess. Yeah.
So once things kind of evolved, and you saw, Andy was in the band, and he books us our first gig, and things kind of start trending in a direction that's wildly different from what you originally conceived. What was it like for you to realize what was happening and where we were going, and kind of see that happening, and not that you weren't able to do anything about it, but it was kind of unbidden, and it just kind of came out of nowhere. And then next thing we know, we were going down this different path. What was that like for you to see that and kind of recognize what was happening?
In the previous bands, usually when we played somewhere, you had like your 3 or 4 friends that showed up.
Yeah.
So many times we played a place and it was literally just like whoever's running the place and like the 3 people that came with us.
Yeah.
I remember one time Little Voice playing at the Melody Inn, and it was Dave Brown. Dave and Rob actually were both there. And then like
Dave and Rob being the gentlemen that keep the place running.
Yeah, the owners. To some of the greatest guys that support local music in Indianapolis. But they were there, and like the 3 people who came with us were there, and there was nobody else there. And
been there.
I remember Erica made some joke from the stage about it. Like a negative, like, or whatever. And Dave like yelled out something, and I can't remember what he said, but it was basically saying it doesn't matter because, you're here and we want to hear it, and you guys are great. And, and I just remember hearing that from Dave, and I was like, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's high praise, because the people that bring you in to play want to make money. I mean, that's the idea. They bring people in to play, and they want you to bring people in to see them because they make money off of that. So if the people who hire you are like, you know what, we're just, nobody's here, but we're happy to have you here because we like you, that's a big deal.
But that was the kind of experience I was used to. Of course, there were a few shows here and there, mainly in Little Voice, where there were bigger crowds. One of them being that time we played Halloween at the Mel.
That was a great night.
So anyway, my point is that once we were in 5-Year Mission and we started playing, and a lot of people were showing up, and like the fan base was growing online, it was definitely a little surreal. Like I was like, oh, so this is what it's like when people actually appreciate your band.
Actually show up. Yeah. Well, I remember playing at the Murat in the basement.
Yeah.
And that was, we were opening for Proto Men. And I just remember getting up there, and we were just the opening band. And I mean, Proto Men are national. I'd heard of them, but it's not like they were some band you'd see on MTV. And, I'm dating myself there, but you know what I mean? They weren't like that, but I mean, the place was packed.
Yeah.
And it was just, we would play shows like that where it's just, wall to wall people. And it is a little surreal, but it's a whole lot of fun.
Well, so when you asked me earlier, about when I was a kid, if I dreamed of being a musician, and I talked about playing like arenas and being on MTV and all that. And by the time I was in Little Voice, I, of course, came to terms with the idea that, well, we're a local band. We're only going to achieve so much, and we're doing it because we love it. I don't expect to be like, in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or anything. Then, and like I never thought, like I knew of the Marat and I had seen bands there, but I'm like, I'm never going to play the Marat.
Yeah.
No one's ever going to fly my band to Vegas. Like, this is not, this is a band where we're going to play at the Melody Inn. We're going to play Radio, and that's fine. Maybe we'll drive to Lafayette once a year. So, with 5-Year Mission, once we started doing stuff like that and playing like the Marat, it was kind of mind blowing. Like, oh, maybe I haven't missed that window to do more with my music.
Well, even playing a venue like the Mel, when it's just packed with people. I mean, when we played the show with P-Laner Z, it was ridiculous.
That was nuts.
I mean, it was just so packed. And I mean, that's not the only show we've had like that. So
yeah,
it is definitely a different experience.
That was our second show. Do you realize that?
With P-Laner Z?
Yeah.
I don't know. I didn't
We
realize that.
we played our first show in September,
Yeah.
and then in October we played with P. Lander Z. It was our second show.
That's so crazy.
That was crazy. That was an awesome night.
I mean, our first show was pretty big too, as I recall, because we were brand new and nobody knew what we were all about.
People showed up in costume.
Yeah.
Like we weren't the only ones wearing uniforms.
Yeah, I remember that. So, yeah. So what, I mean, kind of along these same lines, what, I know there's probably more than one, but just, pick one out, your favorite band moment.
There are so many. But I think playing Whoopi Goldberg onto stage with Jumpin' Jack Flash to like 12,000 people or whatever.
There was a lot.
That was pretty incredible.
That was pretty neat.
That was a very surreal moment.
Yeah, I agree. I remember being on keys and just thinking, don't mess up. Don't mess up.
I know.
The key part was not complicated, but it was like, playing
Kirstie Alley.
Oh, yeah, Kirstie Alley with the Cheers theme.
Yeah, you had to play the Cheers thing on the keyboard.
I played that over and I played that so many times, and I couldn't play it for you now. No way. But I remember just practicing that over and over again. I don't even remember. I have no memory of doing it. I don't remember if I messed it up totally or what, but I think as I recall, I think I did okay. But yeah, that was scary. But Kate Mulgrew, we did the Orange is the New Black song.
Yeah.
That was another one I was just like, man, I played that so many times, trying not to screw it up.
It's a lot to learn.
It is, because we pack a lot of, within I think it was 3 months where we had the time to figure out what the songs were.
We had to learn 30 songs.
Yeah, there were so many.
And we ended up not even using half of them.
Yeah, it was nuts. What about your favorite venue? What's your favorite venue to play?
That's hard. If we're talking locally, it's got to be a tie between Radio and the Melody Inn.
Yeah, they both agree with you.
They both have really, really great things about them.
Well, I think one of the most important things about both venues is that they've always been big supporters.
Absolutely, yeah.
The band, yeah.
And totally different atmospheres.
Yeah.
And totally different sound.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Completely. So, just to kind of wrap everything up here.
Mm-hmm.
A couple things. One, if 5 Year Mission, say we just got done with year 5 and we released it and decided we're done. Mm-hmm. So 5 Year Mission is at an end today. What do you do next?
Ask you and Noah to start Hostile 17. And Andy can go find something else to do because he doesn't like Buffy.
Okay. All right. Hostile 17. All right.
Yeah.
That was Spike's name when he was when he was
season 4. Spike was captured by the Initiative, and they referred to him as Hostile 17.
Yeah, that's a pretty good name. I like that.
Yeah, it's nice and vague.
Yeah, right.
This time it will be Kafka.
Yeah. So over the last what has it been, 13 years? We started the summer of 2009. Played our first show in September of 2010.
Yes.
So for the past 13 years, any regrets?
Wow, that's.
Not including Fark. There's 2 swipes at our drummer in the last 2 minutes.
It's an easy target.
He'll never listen to this anyway. Just kidding.
I think he does.
He totally will.
Regrets. I've had a few. You like that?
Yeah, I did.
Honestly, I can't really think of any actual regrets. Anything that at the time felt like something that I regretted, it, you know how it's hindsight's 2020.
Yeah.
Everything that happens leads to something else that happens. So anything that at the time I regretted that was even slightly related to this band, I don't regret now.
Not even Wolf in the Fold.
You shut up. Wolf in the Fold is in my top 5 songs. with Spock's brain being right on top.
I knew that was coming in there too.
No, I certainly don't regret any of the music. No, nothing like that.
Yeah.
I love the band. I love everything that we've done. I look forward to doing more.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
San Dimas High School football rules.
I think that's a good way to take it out.
Like 5-Year Mission, and do you like getting exclusive content? You should head over to Patreon right now and visit 5-Year Mission, because we've got all the exclusive content that you're not getting on any other social media. There's videos, pictures, sometimes we post news there before we post it anywhere else, behind the scenes of us working on albums and podcasts, and sometimes just pictures of us goofing off that we don't put anywhere else, only on Patreon. And there are many options to choose from. You can be a lieutenant commander, you can be a captain, you can even be an admiral. Each of those comes with their own special perks. One of the perks of being an admiral is that you get to be a producer on this podcast. Currently, our producers are Carol Jones, Jen Tift, Helen Lake, Steve and Frankie Palopoli, Roxy and Becky, Debbie Rinke, Madison Rachel Jones, and Jim Morehouse. So what are you waiting for? Go to Patreon/5-Year Mission right now. That's the number 5-Year Mission. And sign up. It's that easy.
Blah, 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 blah.
Fansets.com is your home for all things pop culture pin related. Right now, featured right there on the Fansets homepage is a super fancy enamel pin version of the Tom Paris plate featured in Lower Decks. And who wouldn't want that? I know I do. But that's not all. You can also find great pins like wearable magnetic deltas from the various shows, the Women of Trek pins with Raffi from Star Trek Picard now available, and a very cool pin featuring friend of the band Doug Jones on the left side and the character he portrays, Captain Saru, on the right. And let's not forget the fan danglers that allow you not only to display your pin on a keychain, but also say fan dangler to all your friends. And you know what? Go ahead and enter Trek Geeks at checkout for 10% off your entire order. That's TREKGEEKS. All caps, no spaces. Why? Because we like you, that's why. Fansets. Our pins have character, and we thank Fansets for sponsoring every single episode of 5-Year Mission, the podcast. Now go get yourself some pins.
Hey man, thanks for having me. It's been awesome being here tonight. I cannot even express how much fun it's been going over the history of my life and the band and talking to you, my good friend Chris. This has been fantastic.
Hey man, we'd love to have you back sometime. We'd love it. It'd be great.
That's my
we'll keep in touch.
That's my celebrity voice.
Yeah, I know. I like that. All right. That's it. That's all I got.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
I sure want to live. I sure want to live.
for listening to 5 Year Mission, the podcast. If anyone is interested in listening to more of our music, check us out on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or anywhere that you can listen to music. Just search for 5 Year Mission and we will be the first thing that pops up. If you would like to contact us, you can email us at 5yearmissionband@gmail.com. You can also find us at 5yearmission.net and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.
5 Year Mission, the podcast, is a production of Coconut Media Works. Executive producers Bill Smith and Dan Davidson. For more great Star Trek discussion, discover the other shows of the Trek Geeks Podcast Network at trekgeeks.com or find us in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
This has been a Classic Rittenhouse production.